Real quick, if you have a story you'd like to hear featured on the channel, then go to mariesfield.com and send it my way. I'd love to feature it, and of course, thank you. I have a fairly strange story about something that happened to me when I was a kid, and it was the first time something like this had ever happened to me. I was around 10 years old, and we had just moved into a new house in a city, a state or so away, because my mom had taken a promotion at her job, and they wanted to transfer her to the branch that was out here. Obviously, I was a bit devastated as I had to leave the school I'd been attending for most of my childhood, as well as leave behind my two friends that I had known since I was a baby. My parents were adamant that I would make new friends, so I had to suck it up and just accept that we were moving. A few weeks after we had moved in, we were walking around the block to introduce ourselves to the neighbors, and a few houses down was a man that worked for the same company as my mom, so basically one of her new coworkers. He had a son named Chris, which was my name as well, but I was Chris with a K. Not relevant, but as a kid, it was the most important thing to me. For some reason, I never really considered Chris to be a good friend, but he was definitely an acquaintance of mine. But I ended up being better friends with some of the other kids on the block that I actually met through Chris. After a few months, Chris and I weren't doing much together, but we still talked whenever we saw each other, so we both knew that the other was still alive. There was one day during the summer that a group of us decided we wanted to go swimming down at what was essentially a small pond with a dock. It was on land that was owned by one of the other guys, Johnny, so we were allowed to mess around in it as much as we wanted to. Altogether, it was about 7 of us that all headed down to the pond to swim. We were all swimming and having a good time, mostly just running and doing cannonballs off the dock into the water. When it was my turn to jump in the water, I got up on the dock and prepared myself to run, but then near the edge, I ended up slipping and fell backwards, hitting my head on the post. When this happened, I remembered slipping and basically falling in slow motion. Then my head hit the wood, and I remember there just being this sharp pain. The next thing I can recall is falling into the water and not being able to move, like at all. I was staring up at the surface of the water, unable to close my eyes, just thinking about how I was dead. Like I said, I was only 10 or 11 at the time, so I really should have had no frame of reference of what death felt like, but I knew right then and there that I was either dying or had died, and my brain just hadn't powered off. I could feel that my lungs were empty, and I remembered the taste of the water as it filled my mouth. Then, I remember seeing Chris swimming down toward me with his hands out like he was my savior, and then it all went black. When I woke up, I was lying on the ground outside the pond with Johnny's parents leaning over me and the boys panicking all in the background. When I came to, I literally gasped for air, and I remember coughing really hard and spitting a bunch of water out, and I could hear Johnny's dad asking me if I could hear him. I nodded that I could, and just kind of laid there staring up at the sky and watching the clouds. The other boys had gone from panicking to celebrating, I'm guessing because I hadn't died. I remember sitting up and asking what happened, and Johnny said that I had slipped and hit my head, then fell into the water. It slowly came back, and I remember finishing off what he said with, "Oh yeah, then Chris jumped in and saved me." I then looked around to thank him and realized that he wasn't there. I asked where he went, and they all just kind of looked at me. Johnny kind of laughed and said, "You're Chris." To which I said, "No, Chris with a CH, the other Chris that was here." Nobody had any idea who I was talking about. They all just kind of stared at me and looked around confused. Johnny's dad said that my parents were on their way and that I should probably get looked at to make sure I didn't cause damage to my head. I nodded along and got up slowly to sit on the front porch waiting for them. On the way to the hospital, I actually asked my mom if she remembered Chris. I don't know why I felt compelled to ask, but he was the son of her coworker, so she would surely know who he was. To my surprise, she said that she didn't know anyone named Chris other than me. I said, "No, the Chris with a CH, the one that is your coworker's son. We met right after we moved into the house when we were introducing ourselves to the neighbors." My mom then pretty much told me that none of her coworkers lived on our block, and that to the best of her knowledge, none of them had a son named Chris. So, to this day, I am the only person that remembers my friend Chris, the one that I met when I was 10, the one that was my mom's coworker's son. Nobody else in my family and none of my other childhood friends knew who Chris was, despite him being the person that saved my life, and someone that I hung out with on several occasions. I know that he existed. I know that he and I were decent enough friends, and I know that he jumped in the water to save me when I was drowning. But yet, he seemingly never existed. I have nothing to prove he ever did exist, unfortunately, other than the memories in my head. I will say that losing a friend to the Matrix, so to speak, specifically the one that saved me that day, is the most painful childhood memory that I have, and while he doesn't seem to exist in this timeline, I will never forget that day and what he did. I have this pretty short but weird glitch that happened to me just a few months ago. I don't get to see my mother too often, so when I do see her, I try to do something nice for her to show her that, while I'm not always around, I do love and appreciate her. 2 things to know about my mom that are important to know for this story. She loves pie, specifically pie from this little bakery that we used to go to when I was a kid, and she is deathly allergic to strawberries. The bakery is near where I live. I stayed in my hometown and she actually moved a couple of hours away, so she doesn't get to go there really anymore. Last month was my mother's birthday, and it was one of those times where I decided I needed to drive out to see her. Because it was her birthday, I wanted to surprise her with one of the pies from the bakery that she loved. So I called them and I put in an order for 1 apple pie and 1 strawberry rhubarb. Unlike my mother, I'm not allergic to strawberries, and strawberry rhubarb is my absolute favorite. When I went to pick it up, I spoke with the bakery owner about my mom. They used to be really good friends, and I verified with her which pie was which because of my mom's allergy. She had actually cut a small bit of the center of the crust out of the strawberry rhubarb pie so that you could see that it was red, so that I could tell, without a doubt, which one was strawberry and which one was apple. She had boxed them, as per the norm, but the boxes just folded closed and you could easily open them to see the pie and know which one was which. I thanked her and left, and I decided to run my strawberry pie home so that it would never be anywhere near my mom or her place. I got home, opened the box, made sure I was putting the right pie in the fridge at home, then left to go see my mother. I won't go into the full detail of our day together, just say it was a great day and she was beyond happy to see both myself and the pie. Though I do want to mention that she never opened the box to the pie until the end of the evening. We were wrapping up the visit and she asked me if I wanted to have some of the apple pie that I had bought, and I said I would absolutely stay for a slice. She grabbed the pie, opened the box, and cut into it, and I was immediately upset when I saw red coming up from the knife. As soon as I saw that, I told her to stop, and I took over cutting it. Sure enough, it was a strawberry rhubarb pie, not the apple one. I was confused. The baker was always good at making sure to keep them properly marked, and I had never gotten the wrong one from her. But mistakes do happen, so I assumed that she may have just given me the wrong one. I apologized to my mom, and I told her that I would be back the next day with her apple pie, and just mentioned that I must have grabbed the wrong one when I left my house, or they may have gotten the order wrong. When I got home, I opened the pie that I had brought back with me, and something just felt weird about it. Because I had mentioned before that they cut some of the crust off for an opening for me, so I could tell which was which told me that she was being careful about the whole thing. This pie had no pieces missing though. My initial assumption was that she just handed me 2 strawberry ones instead of a strawberry and an apple, but then I pulled mine out of the fridge to look at it. When I did, I was even more confused. There was a small window cut into the crust, but the filling was a white and brown color, like it was apple cinnamon. When I left the bakery, I remembered looking at the pies and seeing that the one with the little window was the strawberry one. I remember the dark red filling. When I put mine in the fridge, that's how I verified that I was grabbing the right one. There was red on the crust, but yet when I got home from my mother's, it was white with cinnamon. I have no idea how the pies got switched, or how, at some point, the one with the window was apple instead of strawberry. But at some point in time, everything got changed and flipped to be the opposite of what it was. I know this isn't creepy, just weird, so hopefully your audience will still enjoy it, but to me, it was the strangest thing I've ever experienced. Obviously, I took the correct pie out to my mother's place the next day, and I just told her that I grabbed the wrong one without explaining the weird matrix pie swap that happened. I have a bit of a weird story that happened a few weeks ago, and I'm not sure if it was a glitch or if it was something paranormal, but I'm going to say it's a glitch until proven otherwise. I'm open to it being paranormal, sure, but there hasn't been anything else that's happened in this house to make me think we have a ghost or anything like that. A bit of a background, my husband has been assigned to working overnights for his company for around 6 months. It's not something he wanted to do, and it's not something that we had planned on, but the guy that worked the overnights actually passed away unexpectedly, and they asked my husband if he would do the job until he was replaced. It came with a huge increase in pay, so he took it with the expectation that it would be a few months, but that's honestly a complaint for somewhere else. The point is that he works overnight, and he comes home around the time the kids are getting up to get ready for school. He says good morning to them, sits for a few moments, and then typically heads to bed after that. Unfortunately, he's gotten used to this sleep schedule and he can't turn it off on his days where he doesn't have to work, which I completely understand. On this day in particular, he was off and he had actually gone to bed a bit before the kids were up. He came home at the normal time from the night before shift and told me that he was beyond exhausted and that he was just going to head to bed. I told him I would let the girls know. We said goodnight, and that was that. I finished getting ready for my day, and by the time I went to leave the bathroom and head out of our bedroom, he had been asleep for at least 45 minutes. I could hear him snoring the whole time. I leave to go and get the girls up, and at this point, and much to my surprise, they were already up and getting breakfast in the kitchen. The two of them don't usually get up on their own. They're both really heavy sleepers like their dad, and I mentioned to him that I was surprised they were awake already. My oldest then says that their dad had come in and woken them up. I was a bit confused because he got home almost an hour before they needed to be awake, and there would be no reason for him to do so. Plus, He told me to tell them that he loved them and that he was sorry he wasn't awake to say good morning to them. At first, I thought that maybe he had just somehow forgotten that he woke them up, but again, why would he do so an hour earlier than needed? I asked when he woke them up, and she tells me that it was about 10 minutes ago. I responded that that wasn't possible, as he'd been asleep for nearly the entire hour. The two of them both looked at me confused and told me that he definitely opened their door and told them that it was time to get up 10 minutes ago. They said that he opened the door, flicked on the light, and said, "Hey girls, it's time to get up." And when my oldest looked at her clock, it was 10 minutes before that moment. I really didn't know what to say. I didn't want to scare them or anything more, so I just accepted what she said and moved on because it was weird. My husband was somehow in two places at once. He was passed out completely in our bed, and he had woken the girls up. I heard him snoring the entire time I was getting ready in the attached bathroom. I could see the bed from the doorway. I know for a fact he was in bed the whole time. The only logical explanation I could think of was that maybe he had woken them up when he got home, but I don't know why he would have done that. But if that was the case, the clock would have shown a time way earlier than 10 minutes before they had to get up. I don't think my girls are lying. They're both really well behaved and don't lie about trivial things like that. As I mentioned, this is either a glitch or a ghost, but I'm leaning toward a weird glitch because it was something that likely would have happened if he had been up. But in this timeline, he didn't stay awake, so something in the Matrix definitely broke. I'm originally from England, and I'm going to be a bit vague with this, but I was born and raised in Essex. When I hit my adult years, I was given the opportunity to come over to the US to further my education, and I took it. Long story short, I ended up getting married and have lived in the Chicago area ever since. I think that's enough backstory to really explain who I am and why things were going on when this glitch took place. A few years ago, I decided that I wanted to take some time off and fly back overseas to visit my parents. It had been a while since I'd seen my hometown, and I figured it would be a nice way to spend a couple of weeks in the summer. Unfortunately, my husband couldn't take the time off from work, and we decided that we didn't want to take our 6-year-old son on an airplane to another country, but he was able to at least take the days off to take me to the airport and pick me up when I returned. On the day that I was supposed to leave, we ended up waking up late because our alarms seemingly didn't go off, and I was freaking out about possibly missing my flight. I remember that the whole morning was chaotic, and I felt like I was going crazy. Thankfully, I had already taken the time to pack and get my luggage in the car the night before, so we didn't lose much time. But I remember I was feeling like I was in a major panic the entire time. I remember checking my ticket, checking the departure times, and I recall that I had around an hour and a half at most to get there and get through everything. Honestly, I was fairly upset. We had both set several alarms to make sure I got up on time and didn't miss the flight. When we got to the airport, I remember him parking and getting my son out so that we could say goodbye before I actually went through security. But something felt really off. Again, I know that's vague, but I'll explain it the best I can. The minute I walked through the doors of the airport, the air felt heavier, and the overall mood felt solemn. It almost felt like time slowed down, and like everyone that walked by was staring at me as they passed. I know that sounds really weird, but it's honestly the best way I can explain what it was that was happening. Something changed as soon as I walked in those doors, and I have no idea what it was or why it happened. Anyways, I get my luggage checked and everything all taken care of, and I'm rushing through the process so I can get through security as quickly as possible. I'm making a quick walk back toward the gate, and my husband and son are trying to keep up when he asks why I'm rushing so much. I just kind of stared at him. Did he not remember how much we were panicking this morning to get out the door and get here? I told him that we were running late and that I needed to get through security ASAP, to which he looked at his wrist, then back at me, and dropped a bombshell that confused the hell out of me. He stares at me confused and then says that my flight doesn't leave for around 3 hours. I was shocked by him saying this. I had an hour and a half left when we left. Had he just remembered the time wrong? I ask what he's talking about and pull up my ticket to look at the departure time, and he's right. 2 hours and 43 minutes before my flight. I asked him how that was possible. We woke up late, and I asked why we were freaking out so much to leave the house if we had that much time left to go. He again stares at me confused and explains that we woke up on time. He completely disregards my statement and tells me that the entire morning has been a smooth ride and that everything has gone as it was supposed to. I mentioned the alarms not going off. He says that his alarm went off and that he woke me up that morning. He then tells me that he noticed about halfway here that I was looking upset, and he kind of just chuckled and asked if it was because I thought I was late. I told him no and moved on. I honestly was done trying to explain it. I have no idea what the hell happened when I walked through those doors, but it was as if my entire morning had been reset to how it was supposed to be. We weren't late, there was no panic, and we had woken up on time to the alarms. I distinctly remember all this though. There's no doubt in my mind that my version of events happened. I just don't think they happened in whatever timeline I've shifted to. I have a short and really strange story that happened to me and my best buddy a few years ago. It's one of those things that we can explain to some extent, in that we can tell people what happened, but we have no damn clue what actually occurred. On this night, my buddy and I were going to a local baseball game. I won't say the team because it'll give away my hometown, but it's not one that typically performs well, not that it's relevant. Anyways, we had a good time at the game, and we had quite a few drinks because we were losing. Bad. Despite this, we were not drunk. At least, I wasn't drunk. I was definitely a bit tipsy, but I don't drink enough to actually get wasted. However, because we were drinking, we had paid for a hotel room for us to crash for the night before we went to the game, so we had somewhere to go. We got an Uber to the hotel, but before we went in, my buddy mentioned that he was desperately craving a Reese's. I laughed at him like, "Bro, why didn't we take the Uber to a gas station or something?" And he just shrugged and told me that we needed to go get a Reese's before we went to bed. I again was laughing at him, but said screw it, and pointed down the way to where there was a convenience store. We went to the store and got our Reese's, and then started back to the hotel, and that's when the glitch happened. We walked out of the convenience store, and he stopped to open his candy, and it looked like the sky went from pitch black to as bright as the middle of the day for half a second. It was as if someone had flicked the switch to the sky on for a moment, and then immediately flicked it back off, like it went from black to bright blue back to black. It was the weirdest thing, but we both just kind of stood there for a moment and stared at the sky. I'm sure we looked like we were out of our minds just looking up. When it happened, we both completely sobered up, like 100% completely went from a bit tipsy to completely sober. It was super weird, and neither of us said anything to the other person, though we knew that we both saw it happen. We just walked back to the hotel and didn't say a single word. The next morning, I tried to bring it up, but he was pretty much just dismissive of it, saying, "Yeah, it was weird," and that was it. To the best of my knowledge, the two of us are the only ones that saw it happen, and there's no way to explain it beyond what I said earlier. It was super weird and kind of creepy, but that's about it. Nothing like it ever happened again, and I've only read a few stories that were kind of similar, but not quite the same thing. Though, if anyone has ever had an experience like this, or has a better explanation than the Matrix glitched, I would love to hear it. I wanted to start by saying that I love your channel, and I am super curious about the things that people experience on a frequent basis. I have a bit of a story that happened to me, and it may not be as weird as some of the others, but I think it's worth sharing. It was about a week ago when I had this super weird thing happen to me, and I genuinely cannot seem to be able to place it or figure it out. It was early in the morning, and I was going through my routine, going to the bathroom, taking a shower, brushing my teeth, and all that stuff. After I was done with my normal morning stuff, I figured I should go ahead and take my dog for a walk. I should mention that at this point, I had not looked outside, nor had I checked my phone for the weather, and I had no idea what it was like outside. As I was walking toward the kitchen to at least get the Keurig set up, I thought out loud, I wonder what the weather's like right now. As soon as I finished this thought, I heard what sounded like a radio voice say something like, "It is really coming down out there right now, and I don't recommend going out for too long." It seriously sounded like a radio had kicked on, like when you have an alarm clock that's set for radio. It had a bit of static and the voice saying what it said, and then it was gone. I was a bit creeped out by it because the voice was completely disembodied, and I had no idea where it had come from. I checked my phone to make sure it wasn't something on that. I don't have any of those home speaker assistant things, so it wasn't one of those. I went downstairs to the bedroom to see if I had a radio that may have kicked on in there, but there was nothing. After a few seconds, I kind of shrugged it off, but then I thought, I wonder if the weird voice was right. I then went over to my front door and opened it, and the second I did, the weather seemed to change from still to downpouring. It was like I opened the door as soon as the storm was about to start. It was definitely cloudy, but it wasn't raining yet. Then I opened the door and the rain started. I honestly felt a bit weirded out by this. Not only was this weird radio voice right about its forecast became right at the minute I went to look outside. Obviously, I didn't take my pup out for a walk, much to his disappointment. I've never heard anything like this again in my place, and I still to this day have no idea what the hell it was. I made sure several times to make sure that I didn't have any radios that may have clicked on. I've never read about this happening to anyone else, but if anyone had ever experienced a disembodied voice tell them the forecast at the exact second they ask the universe for it, I would love to know about it. So that, my friends, was a collection of Glitch in the Matrix stories. The stories where the universe just says that continuity doesn't matter. Don't worry if we change the characters halfway through. Don't worry about it. Just keep going. And all we can do is nod our heads and say, okay, sure. I didn't want to enjoy that pie with my mom. I didn't want to have a relaxing flight. I didn't want to let my kids sleep in for another hour, it's like it just gets bored and it just decides to change things because it looks better. It's more amusing this way. Not cool. Not cool. I no longer know what I'm going on about, so I'll go ahead and stop and we'll move on to the word of the week. Just kidding again. I don't do that either. I'm going to save that for Raven. Anyways, if you did enjoy this video, please do give it a like below. And if you'd like to hear more content like this, consider subscribing. And lastly, don't forget to leave a comment on your thoughts or let me know if you could go back in time to witness one event. What would it be? I don't want to do like the what would you tell yourself from the future or whatever. What's something that you would like to either experience again that you enjoyed or something you would like to experience for the first time? I'd like to know. And with that being said, friends, I hope you have a fantastic week. And until next time, take care.